So we are here today on the beautiful Weeki Wachee River. I'm here with TJ. TJ, do you want to start off by kind of introducing yourself? I'd love to give everyone an idea of kind of what you do and who you are.
Thank you for the introduction.
Yeah.
My name is Tiare, TJ Fridrich, and I am the manatee biologist for Save the Manatee Club.
Heck yeah. The official. So do you like going by TJ or Tiare? Does it depend who you're with?
It doesn't depend who I'm with. It depends on whether people can pronounce it or not.
Okay, cool.
But you pronounced it correctly.
Well, I did because you just said it, but I heard that I heard them saying TJ, so
yes.
I was just going with TJ. But I like Tiare. I was going to ask you how to pronounce it. Actually.
Tiare, yep.
Yeah.
I like Tiare too, but
yeah.
we get a lot of supporter phone calls, and people will speak with me over email, and then they'll call and ask for me, and it gets
lost in translation.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel that. My last name is Buzzi, B-U-Z-Z-I, but in Italian it's really Buzzi.
Oh.
But when I try to tell people that, like it's like pizza,
Yeah.
2 Z's, it's like a T-Z. People just don't seem to really understand that concept, and so I usually just end up saying, yeah, it's Buzzi. It's so much easier.
Yeah, my first and my last name are not pronounceable, so.
Yeah. So you got double whammy on yours.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, so we have, 2 manatees that are up in front of us here. It looks like everyone's starting to see them. So what is a typical day like for a marine biologist, a manatee biologist in your world?
Well,
is there a typical day?
In my field, every single day is different.
Yeah.
As the manatee biologist for Save the Manatee Club, the focus of our organization is protecting manatees and their habitat for future generations, which obviously can encompass a lot of different things. So that can be reviewing development permits to make sure that, say, a marina isn't going into a critically important manatee habitat. That can be partnering with local governments to provide them with brochures and pamphlets, or reach out to the public to give them more information on manatee safe boating.
Yep.
It can be supporting research from other organizations. We have a manatee sighting form, so when members of the public see manatees in the wild, they can send us those sightings, and all of those go to me, and I review them. And then we work with our state and federal partners to make sure that any of the animals, if they do end up appearing sick, or if they're outside of the state of Florida, that we reach out to those partners and pass that information along.
Okay, cool. So yeah, you are doing a lot of everything.
Every day is different.
Yeah, that's kind of like, that's probably what makes the job fun, I would imagine, is like you're not doing the same thing every day, and you're actually doing impactful things that are like making a difference in lifetime,
Yes.
So I think that from the outside looking in, I can see how that could be super rewarding.
It definitely is, and I love to learn, and in this job, there's always something new to learn.
Yeah. How did you find out about the job? Oh, look, he just like breached up there. He almost flew out of the water. How did you find out about the job, or how did kind of all of this come together? I know you studied marine biology, so even from back then, like, why did you get into marine biology? What was it about marine life that excited you?
So first, I will answer your question, but first we want to make sure we give these manatees plenty of space.
Yep.
So we're just going to sit here for a second and watch where they're going.
Yep.
It looks like they might be trying to find food in the middle there, but if they are heading to the left, then we're going to stay to the right and make sure to give them plenty of space.
Cool. Yeah, one of the big things that we obviously deal with.
And so we're trying to make sure that they have plenty of space when we go around them.
Yeah.
You're stuck.
I'm stuck. Your camera's good. Yeah, one of the big things, and these people don't even realize they're going right over them.
No. Or they do and they don't care, which...
I hope not, right? But one of the big things, like, with get up and go kayaking is obviously out here, especially as the manatee, and trying to educate people on the best way to do what we're doing now, which is called passive observation. It's tough because so many people obviously don't know what that is. So do you find yourself like not only trying to help the manatees, but like help the humans on like how to interact with the manatees a lot?
Yes, one of the very big parts of my job is increasing public awareness and
Yeah.
education around manatees. Because a lot of the time, the issues stem from just a lack of awareness,
Yeah,
not
lack of
recognizing
education. Yeah,
why manatees are threatened and what is needed to help protect them.
yeah,
So, for example, in Florida, if you're over a certain age, you don't need a boating training
Yep.
to drive a boat.
Yep.
And so that means that there are thousands of people who can
Many,
take
yeah.
out a boat, rent a boat, and have no additional training at all,
Yeah.
which means that they might not know about the manatee zones.
yeah,
So one of the things we do is we'll go to marinas and provide them that information
training,
to
yeah.
share with boaters, or we'll go out and we'll do trainings and explain why it's important that we boat slow.
yeah,
And or if we're aware of an area that needs an additional zone, we can work with the local government to bring attention to that and help them get the data and whatever they need in order
Yep.
to make that a reality.
that's cool.
Yeah, you have the 360 camera on?
Yeah,
Yeah, none of this is allowed.
I know.
There's-
So we paddled earlier upstream here, and for anyone that's not aware of the new rules at Weeki Wachee, you're not supposed to like moor your kayaks or boats to the shoreline and get out and trample the vegetation. So as you can see, that's that rule is being broken, for lack of better terminology.
It's interesting that there's no sign at this specific location.
Yeah, we were talking. There's a sign upstream that says like "Beware of water moccasins," and there was no one at that sandbar. So we were like, they just need to put more water moccasin signs everywhere. And I think that is more like visually like, oh my gosh, than the new rules. You know, so. I don't know. I think people notice those things a little bit more than the new rules. But
and
to your point, there's no signage out here.
Well,
yet.
the reason for that is because
Manatees over here.
there could be a direct consequence of going in an area where there's a water moccasin,
Yeah.
but the river is long and there isn't always law enforcement on
Correct.
the water.
Yeah. Correct.
So if people know about the rule, but don't think they're going to get in trouble, then they're not going to follow it.
Yep. So what should we do kind of in this situation? We've got a few people hovering around here. The manatees are kind of just hanging out. What's the best action?
So the best action, there's two different ways to go about this right now. The first one is to hang out and kind of watch what other people are doing, and if they get too close, let them know that we don't want to chase manatees, to let them go where they're going. Sir, just give them some space, please. They're trying to get away from you. That's why they're swimming so fast.
So when there's two together, is that usually like a male and female, or does it just depend?
Usually if there's two together, it's a mom and calf.
Okay.
Calves will stay with their mom for up to 2 years.
Okay, cool.
And they can get pretty big during that time.
Yeah.
So oftentimes that could be, that one is pretty large,
Yeah.
but I still think that that's her calf.
Yeah. So when they're mating, they don't really stay together with their mates, more so just the mom and the calf will
So
stay together.
a mating herd is one focal female in the middle of usually around 12 or even more
Yep.
males. And a mating herd can stay together for weeks.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so that's when you see them always like
That's when you see
flipping
them
over
rolling
each
and
other.
flipping
Yeah.
around. That's a mating herd.
Yeah.
But male manatees will actually do that behavior without a female present.
Okay.
So it's only mating if there is a focal female.
Okay.
And
cool.
then once mating has concluded, the animals will disperse.
Yeah. Okay.
Manatees are considered semi-social animals because we often do see them alone, or you'll see a mom and calf,
Yep.
but you typically don't see a lot of animals traveling together outside of a mating herd.
Yeah. So I think like a couple of the common misconceptions are like, oh, you should feed a manatee water, you know, like when you see one, or I've seen people throwing lettuce in the water when there's a manatee around. What are some of those like common things that people should not do that I think are out there that people do, not knowing that it's like not a good thing? You know what I mean?
Well, feeding and watering manatees is against the law.
Okay, so it's illegal. You shouldn't do it, and it's illegal.
It's illegal at the federal level. It is federally illegal.
So you don't want those problems.
And the reason for that is because it is illegal to change the natural behavior of a wild manatee. Any type of change, whether that be purposeful or not purposeful, is called harassment.
Yep.
And when people give manatees food and water, they're attracting them to a place where they wouldn't normally be. So even here in the Weeki Wachee right now, if you were to feed a manatee in this location where we are right now, you can see there's no grass here.
Yeah, yeah.
There's no reason other than manatees traveling out to the Gulf to find food or going all the way upriver to find food that a manatee would be stopping here other than to rest.
Okay.
Right? If you were to attract a manatee to this area right now, you have dozens of people paddling by.
That's an understatement.
So now you have a manatee who is positively associating this with people.
Yeah.
And that's going to encourage them to go up to more people.
Yeah.
And
That's the problem.
as boaters, are the biggest threat to manatees in the wild.
Yeah. And that's probably another misconception that people don't realize is, I think a lot of time people think that it's the propeller that's like killing these animals, but oftentimes it's like the blunt force trauma from the boats that's actually doing the majority of the damage. Although propellers are not great either, right? But to your point, like if they're thinking that they're going to get something out of coming towards this vessel or towards a person, and that vessel happens to be a boat that's moving fast, like that's just a recipe for disaster.
Exactly.
Yeah. So we'll go backwards now because I think the manatees changed my my line of thought. But how did this all get started? Where did your love for manatees kind of come into play? And did that happen in school? Like, did something happen young? I'm really curious, like how this all came about for you.
Well, I am from New York originally. I'm from Long Island, and we don't have manatees there.
I was going to say it's a little far north. Yeah.
Sometimes manatees will travel all the way up to Massachusetts, but you're not going to be standing on your dock looking for a manatee up there.
Yeah.
The first time I saw a manatee was when I was doing my master's. I went to the University of Miami Rosenstiel School, and part of that program, I went there for tropical marine ecosystem management. So at that time, I already knew that.
That's very specific.
Yes, it is very specific. It's a mouthful
That's cool.
of a master's title. But I had done a lot of research in undergrad, spent a lot of time snorkeling and scientific diving, collecting data in the lab, looking at microscopes, and realized that I wanted to combine the research that's already being collected out there and use that to improve management.
Yep.
So like in the way that the reason that the Weeki Wachee has a springs protection zone, one of the reasons for that is because a report came out showing that trampling of the vegetation, the plants on the bottom of the Weeki Wachee, by people getting out of their vessels was the biggest cause for erosion and loss of grass here. And we can see it right now. There is no grass. No grass at all. This would be lush.
Yeah.
Yeah,
and the further up you go, the more lush it is.
Yep, and that's because there's less
where the people are, yeah.
Right now we're in the area where there's homes and Airbnbs, and people very often they won't know any information because
it's their first time.
They come here. A lot of people come here expecting that if there's something they need to know, Airbnb will tell them what to do.
Yeah.
There'll be a sign. There'll be some type of information.
Yeah.
Otherwise, they take out their kayak, their tube, and they go on the river, and they have no idea. And I don't fault them for that. Because
you can't. I mean, they don't. You don't know what you don't know.
The knowledge isn't there.
Yeah. And that's I think that's part of the like problem, quote unquote, that Get Up and Go is trying to solve, is that we're, call it like it is, like we're another kayak company that's on the water using the water, and I don't want to be another kayak company that is creating damage by that. I'd rather be a kayak company that is educating guests on, like, the next time that you guys come here and recreate, these are the best practices. Like if we're their first time coming out here, how great would it be if we could give them those best practices so that the next time they don't just trample down the grass underneath. And it's like a dilemma that I always go through in my head, is that, like, do we contribute to the problem, or are we helping the problem? And obviously if there was no one on the waterway ever, that would be the best scenario. So in my head I'm like, I think we contribute to the problem, but at the end of the day, if we can do it in the right way and teach people how to do it in the right way, a part of me feels like, okay, we're doing the right thing.
I think that the issue is very nuanced.
Yeah.
And ecotourism always has been, because without people, not just here, but everywhere in the world, without people posting on social media and letting people know this is here and you can come see it, some of those areas would still be undiscovered, pristine. But at the same time, we have to be realistic and know that at some point, like, it's not like you guys are the only ones on the river.
Yeah.
You know? And there's very few places in Florida where there aren't already boaters on the water.
Yep.
And
if people
Florida's
are gonna,
letting in 1,000 people a day moving here. So it's the, you know, and the landscape of ecotourism completely changed during COVID, and no one was ready for it.
Yeah.
A lot of these areas have gotten so much more tourism in such a short time that they didn't think it would ever be like this. And now we're at a point where, you know, how do we decide when it's time to say, hey, we're at capacity, or you know, there needs to be some additional rules put in place.
Yeah, I love what Taylor and Danny have done out here, the owners of our Weeki Wachee location. They were like the first tour company to say, hey, we're only doing no exit tours out here. And now the waterway has turned to being a no exit waterway. So I think, you know, like, we're trying to be ahead of the curve when it comes to leaving less of a footprint and you know, leave no trace principles and make sure we're doing the right things. And yeah, to your point, like, people are going to come out here no matter what. If we can figure out the best practices and find people like you that can teach us those best practices, then I think we're all going to be better off in the end, you know. And so I'm glad that, like, we've found partners like you that have helped us learn these things along the way, because even me, like, I grew up in Florida and didn't know you know, like, you don't know until you know. Like, you don't know what these best practices are until someone that has studied it and understands it can teach you what those best practices are. And so yeah, I'm super thankful that, like, Save the Manatee is a thing, and that you guys are doing, like, this amazing work out here. It sounds fun for you. Like, I almost want to switch jobs with you at this point. I'd like to be you know, traveling around looking for manatees and helping them survive. And I think it's super important, and I think what you're doing is really cool.
Well, by encouraging your different franchises to get certified, you are making that difference.
Yeah.
You know, and we couldn't have our partnership with you if you hadn't started your franchise.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah,
so
true.
everybody plays a role. They're not all the same role.
Yeah.
And even then, Taylor was the one who wanted to get Guardian Guide certified, which is our ecotourism stewardship program for manatees.
Yep.
And without her connecting me with University of Florida IFAS Extension, we wouldn't have our volunteer program out here.
That's so crazy.
You know, but if you ask Taylor, she would never say it was because of her. And
yeah.
And she's just incredible in that way.
Yeah, she is. Taylor is so cool. She was, so I still want to hear, like, how you guys first got connected, but from my perspective, she was a tour guide of ours at our Crystal River location, which one of my friends, Austin, owns. And so she was guiding out there, saw the business, saw how it ran, wanted to do something, you know, for herself here. She got married on this waterway.
Yes, she did.
And so her and Danny were like, let's try it and, you know, see what happens. And they've grown it into a really special thing. But yeah, I'm curious, how did that whole thing come about for you guys? Where did you meet Taylor?
So Taylor was actually certified through our Guardian Guides program before I was hired on.
Okay.
And she is so enthusiastic about the program, has always been pushing the other franchises to get certified from the very beginning.
Yep.
And when I came to do her recertification, we hit it off immediately. Very like-minded. We paddled the river together pretty much right after that. We've been fast friends. And, you know, she had connections and people who, they're at UFIFAS, we work with Brittany Scharf, and she had interest in looking into the manatees here and the harassment issues, and it really just needed 3 people who had all the pieces to come together and say, we can do this. And I got a text, and it was, hey, if we can get a proposal in 1 month, we can do this.
Wow.
But Taylor's a fast mover. You know, she was ready, and I was ready, and so we've been aware of harassment on Weeki Wachee for a very long time.
Yeah.
The general thing with ecotourism, you know, and trying to improve it to become more sustainable is you really need a local connection who is on the ground. You can't come in as an outside organization and start telling people what to do.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter if you have your best interests at heart. You have to work with the people who care about it the most and want to see that change, and they were that for us.
Yeah, that's awesome. Look at these 2 coming by.
I wonder how far up they'll go.
is it a struggle for them to go like against the current? You think they're exerting themselves a little
They're
bit? Or not
definitely
really?
using energy,
Yeah.
but manatees can burst at speeds up to 18 miles an hour.
Yeah, so that's something I got to tell you about, okay? Because the first bioluminescent tour I ever gave, like I just started the company, I'd given some to like friends and family or whatever, but like the first like paid tour that I ever gave, bioluminescent, it's dark as hell out in the middle of the Merritt Island National Wildlife Refuge, and we're in the middle of the Indian River Lagoon, and all of a sudden, there's just like water flying everywhere. Stuff was hitting the top of the water. A lady was in her own kayak. She didn't use ours, and she actually fell out of her kayak. And thankfully, we were only in like maybe like 3 feet of water, probably about what the shoreline is over here. And I did not know at the time that that's what manatees do. Is if they're spooked,
If they're startled.
right, they freaking take off. So I went down a rabbit hole of like manatee freakouts on YouTube that night to see like if it was a manatee or a shark. Like I didn't know what to even say. I was like, I don't know
Sorry.
what that was. Yeah,
Probably not a creature.
But that was the first my first experience with a manatee actually going like 20 miles an hour through the water, splashing, hitting the top of the water with its tail. And there was probably like 8 of them that all just like, I think it was like one of those mating herds that all just like took off in different directions. It was cool because the bio was like glowing everywhere, but it freaked me out. And I it's funny to this day, my girlfriend at the time, she's my wife now, and I were joking about it because like afterwards we were living in different apartments, but I'd called her afterwards and I'm like, I need to sleep at your place because I'm just like spooked. I'm freaked out. So it was my first encounter with a manatee going that fast, and I didn't know that happened until that happened. And it's pretty incredible to see manatees doing that. Not that I saw much of it because it was so dark. I just heard the craziness of what was going on.
What's interesting is that mating herd, when manatees are in a mating herd, they are really one-track minded.
Mate.
So, my guess is a manatee solo probably would have heard your group coming and avoided you.
Yeah, yeah.
But that's the reason FWC
okay.
makes all of those posts every spring saying, hey, watch out for the mating herds, because they will not move.
They're just chill. They're trying to do their thing.
They are trying to do something, and
they've got a mission.
They are not paying attention to you.
Yeah, yeah.
But that also makes manatees, very likely to get hit by a boat if boaters aren't aware or thinking that it's a joke. And
yeah, that makes sense. I didn't even think of it that way. That like they're so focused on what they're doing that like we probably just came up through the middle of them doing what they're doing. And that's what I love about educating people. It's just something as simple as here's the reason the manatee might be doing that is a complete shift, because understanding how they use the habitat and why they do what they do goes a long way to being able to explain why it's important that we follow certain behaviors when we're out on the water. Yeah, 100%. I don't know if you saw, but the other day I adopted 7 because I broke the website. I adopted 7 manatees in a period of like 10 minutes, and I made the website crash. So I have to go back on and adopt a couple more. I'm in a like 120-day program with some other entrepreneurs, and we had to do this give and get thing, and you kind of ask the group for something, and then in return you give them something, and I wanted to adopt a manatee for everyone. So I went on the other night and I adopted a bunch of manatees. So it's really fun to go on the website and like read about all of these manatees and like where they hang out, what their habits are, who they are. You get like attached to them. Do you find that like you have a couple of like favorite manatees that you've come across in your time? Are you allowed to pick favorites?
Oh, I am 100% allowed to pick favorites. But,
okay.
Probably my favorite manatee that we have in our program is Zelda.
Okay.
Because I'm just fascinated by the
manatees. She was on
manatees,
page 12 all the way at the end.
The manatees that use the Florida Keys.
Yep.
There's just so much that we don't know about manatees and when they use the keys, why they're there. There's theories.
Why don't we know much? Is it because it's just such a vast area? Like it's hard to track that, or why is that difficult?
Well, so a lot of the information we have on manatee behavior, why they do what they do, where they go, is because they gather at warm water locations. Mm-hmm. And the Florida Keys doesn't really have one spot where manatees are going to be in the wintertime. There are some locations where people are more likely to see them, but my thought is some of that is because people are giving them water.
Yeah. That makes sense.
You know, when you're up in a spring, manatees have lots of access to fresh water, and they can get fresh water from the food that they eat. But when you're in a marine environment like in the Keys, manatees need to find a source of fresh water. And there are natural sources of fresh water. There's rain, there's upwelling of fresh water through the ground. But if someone is washing their boat or there's a marina, that fresh water might attract manatees.
Yeah.
But that definitely, so I'm just fascinated by the animals that go there and what they're doing. Almost all of our adoptable animals are blue spring animals.
Yeah.
And it's really cool that we have multiple generations being able to watch an animal that has a name, that has a specific scar pattern, come back with a calf and be able to track how many calves they've had.
Yeah.
Blue spring animals are also the healthiest in the state, and we're not exactly sure why. There are studies looking into that. The thought is that there's a lot of food available for them. There's actually areas where the FDEP won't spray. They won't spray any pesticide and just allow manatees to feed on the invasive vegetation.
There's also
because manatees eat it.
Yeah, there's also really good protections in place there with the volunteers that are out there every single day making sure that no one is harassing the manatees.
Well, and unlike Crystal River, there are no boats allowed inside the sanctuary during the wintertime. So yes, there are no boats that are able to access the smaller, federal sanctuaries, but in Crystal River, but at Blue Spring, the entire run is closed.
Yeah.
And they'll never close the entirety of Kings Bay. Yeah. But you're definitely getting animals being harassed as they're traveling in and out of those sanctuaries. Yep. Especially in areas where there's not a lot of space to travel, like Idiot's Delight 1 and 2, which is right outside of Three Sisters Springs. If you go there in the wintertime and people are swimming or kayaking, they're right up against the rope. And so now those animals, there's no food right around those sanctuaries, so manatees have to essentially make their way around people to go out and find food. And that's an additional level of stress for animals that are already stressed because it's cold.
Yeah. You know so much. She's like, I'm a biologist for a reason, okay?
So yeah, I saw my first manatee when I was doing my master's.
In Miami?
In Miami.
Okay.
When I was doing a boating course.
Cool.
So I saw them out in Biscayne Bay.
So at that point, you were doing marine stuff, but it wasn't necessarily manatee focused?
No, at the time I was focusing on marine protected areas, so like the Florida Keys National Marine Sanctuary. And general connectivity between different habitats and kind of learning a lot of those things.
Cool.
And then as part of my master's, we were able to design our own project, and I had seen a talk by a researcher at the Clearwater Marine Aquarium Research Institute on the manatees that they fit with trackers and all the data they collect and making the maps for that. And I have a lot of experience with using ArcGIS to create maps.
Yep.
So I asked if I could work with them for my project, and I ended up going through over 50,000 data points.
Sounds easy.
But I also had the opportunity to go out in the field and look for manatees that had trackers on them. They use VHF tracking, so if for some reason the satellite doesn't connect where the animal is, and you don't know exactly where the animal is out on the water, you can use the VHF to kind of find them.
Cool.
And a big part of the Manatee Rescue and Rehabilitation Partnership, big part of their program is once animals are returned to the wild with a tracker on, scientists go out and find those animals and see how they're doing. Because sometimes animals, their injury, maybe something happens and they need to be brought back in for more care.
We got another one over here.
Maybe they're an orphan calf, and during the 2 years where a calf is with their mom is when they learn all the places that they're supposed to go, the warm water, the fresh water, what to eat. And so these animals, when they're returned back into the wild, they're considered naive in that they don't necessarily know those things. And so sometimes they don't make it all the way, where they need to go, and they need to be rescued again. But a lot of times these animals will graduate. They'll spend their time with the tracker on, and they'll do well, be in good body condition, go the places we expect them to go, and they'll graduate and have their tracker removed, and then they're good to go.
Yeah.
So being a part of that program, being a part of working with Clearwater Marine Aquarium Research Institute, I learned a lot about how that works, how the tracking system works, and I had also been looking into the different manatee protection zones, the state zones, and the different laws. And eventually, that kind of was the perfect background that I needed for my job here. So I like to say I fell into manatees because I really love how animals interact with their environment, why they do what they do, where they go, and how it's all connected, the bigger picture.
Yeah.
And I've gotten to really see that with manatees.
Yeah, that's a really cool story. So after you graduate, you moved back to New York though, right?
So I've been around.
Okay.
After I graduated, so actually before I graduated, while I was doing my project with Clearwater, I also got an internship with Mississippi State University Extension, doing GIS mapping for their derelict crab trap program, and also doing shoreline restoration with them. And so I lived in Mississippi for a little while. And then after that, I went to the Keys to get my dive master. And then that's when COVID hit, when I was kind of doing that. And the day the dive shop closed to tourism was the day that I got my certification.
Oh, wow.
And I packed up everything that could fit in my car, because I had my stuff in a storage unit from when I was doing my master's, and drove back to New York in a day and a half.
Oh my God. I made that drive like a year ago, and it's, I wouldn't do it again. You know, it's a long drive.
I grew up doing that drive. My grandparents lived in Port St. Lucie,
Oh, cool. That's where I live.
Oh, okay, yeah. They lived in Port St. Lucie, and every year during the President's Day
drive
break,
that I did,
we would drive down and do a road trip, and so I grew up doing that every single year. So it's more of just keeping yourself busy for 25 hours.
Podcast, music, audiobooks, singing.
Yes. Phone calls.
Yeah, phone calls are a great way to pass the time in a drive.
Yep. So
that's fun.
Then I worked for the New York State DEC Marine Office, and I did more mapping for them. I mapped some of their offshore wrecks for them, and I went out and did some fish surveys, a little bit of everything.
Yeah, wow. And then fell into manatees again.
And then fell into manatees.
So yeah, when that happened, like how did that connection happen between Save the Manatee and what you were doing at the time? Like, was it just an opportunity that popped up? How did you hear about it?
So I followed them on Facebook.
Cool.
I want to say that most marine biologists, when they're in school, especially in undergrad, at least in my case, and from what I've heard, you'll have advisors that tell you, you'll never work with marine mammals, so if you're in this to work with marine mammals, just forget about it or change your field.
Jeez.
And that wasn't my focus when I was in school. I love everything, but I especially love invertebrates, like sea stars. And so I worked in a soil lab, I've worked in a deep sea biology lab. I'll do anything because I just enjoy marine biology and science, and so it was never my long-term goal to work in marine mammals. But then I followed Save the Manatee Club because it is kind of a dream. Imagine to work for a nonprofit that's entire goal is saving manatees. I mean, who wouldn't want to do that? And they had posted on their Facebook that they were hiring, and I thought, well, I have all the skills that they're looking for. Let me just throw my resume in. And then I got it.
Wow, that's so cool. And that was how long ago now? 2.5, 3 years ago?
3 years in May.
Okay, cool. So just over 3 years. Holy crap. Wow, and any like big accomplishments in the last 3 years that you're super proud of that have happened through your work?
Well, obviously the Weeki Wachee. Just after we started talking with Taylor about the Guardian Guides program and certifying her guides, and it became. Oh, I think I just saw an otter.
Was that an otter?
I think it didn't look like a fish to me.
I saw it too, just the tail though. Oh yeah, it is an otter.
It's an otter.
Over there. Oh, cute little guy. Poor girl. So you have any friends? Is he traveling solo right now?
I don't know. Otters aren't my specialty.
Yeah, look. There he is.
But there is Otter Watch. So if you have a video of it.
All right. They missed an opportunity there because it definitely should have been called the Otter Spotter. But Otter Watch will work.
Maybe that is what it's,
It should be.
I'm not going to speak for them. Just, there might be a way to report that you saw one.
That's cool.
I was saying something.
Oh yeah, working with Taylor. No, we get sidetracked by wildlife here. It's okay. So working with Taylor and the Guardian programs.
Once the locals started hearing that there was a program that was really focused on staying in your kayak and providing education on the manatees, because the locals know about the harassment and it's in their backyards.
Yep. Some of the locals do the harassing too, by the way, which is
something
we experienced earlier.
It has been controversial.
Yeah.
Change is always controversial
it is.
at first, but we have seen a lot of people slowly kind of come on board and say, you know what, this is actually a good thing, and I think it should get more attention. And so I was invited to speak at the Weeki Wachee Summit with Brittany about manatees in this area, and we spoke to the county commissioners about that, the different state agencies. So this area didn't really have a lot of attention, I think, from the science side for manatees. Like people were seeing videos and images of kayakers and operators here on TikTok and Instagram. But as far as, a long-term data set or being aware of what's going on here to the manatees, it's just unless you have a local connection, there's not a lot of ways to access the river. Yeah. Unless you're staying in an Airbnb or something like that. And so it's not like Crystal River where it's completely surrounded by the refuge. Yeah. And
infrastructure.
The state park is pretty far upriver. Yeah. Manatees do go up there, but a lot of the harassment manatees deal with is in the lower portion of the river that doesn't have any protection. Yeah. Or at least it didn't before the spring protection zone was put in place. Yeah. So there's definitely been a shift locally, that like awareness that there's more that we can do if we all work together. And so I'm really proud to have been a part of that.
That's so cool.
Very recently, we were working with the city of Jacksonville staff to help them identify marinas or boat ramps that are in need of more signage. Mm-hmm. Because a lot of the signs that are out there just statewide, they get blown away by hurricanes or they get sun bleached. So pointing out the different boat ramps that were in a manatee protection zone and letting them know which ones could be best placed for a sign. So a lot of the things that we do is say, hey, if this is a project you've wanted to do but you don't have the manpower for or the time, we're happy to take on some of that load and help you out with that. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great way to approach that. Do you think that, because we operate in so many different springs now, do you think that a similar system to what's happening here at Weeki is coming to the rest of the springs? Where do you think we are in that process of protection of manatees at other springs beyond Weeki?
I think that every single spring system is unique. And Weeki Wachee is especially difficult compared to other springs because it is so close to Crystal River. Mm-hmm. So the misconceptions about what is legal and what isn't legal that people do in Crystal River follows people to Weeki Wachee. And so you're getting people that do behaviors here that they would not do in other areas of the state. Okay. It's also still very wild Florida, where you don't see law enforcement that often up here. Yeah. Sometimes you do, right? And law enforcement is an issue. The amount of law enforcement is an issue in every county. Yeah. There are just not.
It's hard for them to have the resources to be out on the water.
On the water. Yeah. They can't be everywhere. It's just that's just the truth. Yeah. So a social change, a county-wide change, is kind of what we're hoping for here, is that, the county put in the Springs Protection Zone. The county is considering a manatee protection zone out in the estuary to slow boaters. Yep. There's more that can be done here. And so I think hey guys. I would love to see more changes like that happen at other springs. Yeah. In Alachua County, they have a staff member we've been working with up there who is very interested in manatees and has actually partnered with us with our manatee sighting forum to create a manatee sighting network up in that area of the Suwannee, Santa Fe, because there are not a lot of people that live up there, but the people who are out on the water are the ones that are seeing manatees. Yeah. And so in order to fill that data gap, she's been reaching out to locals, and we've been creating flyers, and we have our forum online. And so I think it really takes having people who are interested and want to move things forward in positions of power. Yeah. And so I would love to see more people who are interested in manatees who think, man, I don't know if I have time for this, but I'd love to see this happen, reach out to us and let us know, and we can start building something with them.
Yeah.
Or give them resources if that's what they need.
Yeah, something. Yeah. What is it that they need, and then how can you guys help them with that need? It's like, I think that's a cool way to approach it, and to the point of like, police officers can't be everywhere. You guys can't be everywhere doing it. So like having these partners in different places, I think are really important for you guys. And that's why I love what Taylor and Danny are doing, and being, having these partnerships that gives you the local knowledge of what's happening in the area when you can't be there every day, is super important. What's your like next big project, like what is something that you want to see accomplished maybe in your, I don't know, next several years working for Save the Manatee? Is there anything big that you guys are currently kind of taking on? Or is it more of just, continuing to oversee these projects that you guys already have in place and making sure they're working? Like, is there any big goals that you guys have?
We definitely have some longer term goals that we are continuing to work on. Almost everything that we do can be broken down into smaller pieces. So it always starts usually with background gathering, information gathering, and then a conversation with someone.
Yeah.
But one of the long-term projects that has been getting a lot of forward movement recently is FWC, so Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission, and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, along with the power plants and other agencies, are working to improve warm water habitat connectivity for manatees.
Cool.
So it's estimated that 66% of all wild manatees are dependent upon artificial sources of warm water to survive the winter. So power plants.
Yeah, I was going to say power plants.
And power plants were not built to be online forever. So
interesting. So what happens when they shut off is the question.
That is the question. Yeah. That some power plants have, they've actually been, what's the word for it? There's a specific word that I can't think of, so I'll have to say it differently. But some power plants have specific plans called manatee protection plans.
Okay.
That talk about, the temperature of the water coming out of the outflow can be, what time of year manatees are going to be in there, and what protections they have.
So they're doing that kind of on purpose, essentially.
Yes and no.
Okay.
Power plants definitely attract manatees, and that is well known.
Yeah.
There have been, things have already been in place to make sure the water temperature isn't more than is what's necessary to support manatees, but there are manatees in areas where, like in the Indian River Lagoon,
yep,
a lot of manatees gather at the Cape Canaveral Energy Center.
Yep.
And because of the loss of seagrass in that area, there is no food around that power plant.
Yeah.
So, and that's not the only location where that's true, but we've also significantly changed the landscape of Florida, where there might have been fresh, warm water available for manatees in that location that has been paved over.
Yeah.
Or redirected somewhere
Completely
else.
Changed.
And
yeah.
so now manatees, from a study that came out a couple years ago, it takes manatees around a year and a half to change their overwintering site. So if a power plant is completely turned off, for them to shift and realize, I'm not going to keep coming there. So if you were to just turn off a power plant, guaranteed manatees would die.
Oh, wow.
So what do you do?
Yeah.
And that's something that's on our minds, as well as all of our partners as well.
Yeah.
Well, we can wait till we're past this.
Yeah.
What? They're dredging.
They're dredging.
Yeah, so there's a lot of sediment, a lot of extra sand and organic matter at the bottom of the river, and a lot of that has come from erosion from development. Like whenever you pull out trees that naturally line the shoreline, you're going to get sand that just every time it rains, every time there's a storm, ends up in the river. Yeah. But then you're also, when you have a healthy ecosystem where you have grasses, and fish and all the things that would, then anything that falls in the river, is part of that, and it's not adding additional nutrients. Yeah. But what happens is, we get a lot of fertilizer and other things that come into the waterway when it rains, and if that sinks to the bottom, it creates this organically rich sediment, and a lot of times grasses can't grow in it. So sucking out that extra sediment could help grasses reestablish, but most likely they'll need to be planting done.
Okay.
In order, you could get some grasses naturally attaching.
Yeah.
You know, once the sediment is set up.
Yep.
But we are very far away from the main area that does have grass right now, right in the river, in the state park.
Okay. Yeah, and there are companies that do actually plant those seagrass.
That's the same company that's dredging right now.
Okay, so they do that, and then they'll hopefully plant.
So
afterwards.
they'll do the suction dredging, and then in Crystal River, that's what they've done. They've gone in, removed the extra sediment, and then planted the grasses.
Yeah, that's so cool.
So Sea and Shoreline is the main company that does that.
Cool.
There are also on the east coast of Florida, there are several other nonprofits and universities that grow seagrass in nursery tanks and outplant those back into the Indian River Lagoon. Weeki Wachee has its own specific type of eelgrass.
Interesting.
And from what I've heard, it can be very difficult to grow it.
Okay.
And, you know, it would be a really big question of whether you would want to plant a grass that does well but isn't the native grass to that river.
Yeah.
Because if it takes over, then it'll likely outcompete the native grass, and it should be protected what is here, especially if the reason that it's dying is because of us.
Yeah.
Like all that dark area, that's no good.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting to see like how the rivers change over the years too. You know, I've been out at Rock Springs for 8 years now, and just sometimes it gets wider, sometimes it gets narrower, sometimes deeper, shallower. Like it's just always changing, and it's like this forever balance, I think, of finding what's right for that specific river. That's very hard to do, you know. It's tough.
So a big thing that is usually done before any dredging or any planting takes place is it's called a feasibility study.
Okay.
A study that shows, is this possible?
Can we do
what
this?
What is necessary for this to get done? It's obviously a big effort.
Yeah, it's cool to see. It's kind of loud, but it is cool to see that they're actively I think there was 3 dredges out here today that are actively working on making this river more inhabitable for manatees and just more healthy, you know.
So even when I came out here probably around 2.5 years ago for the first time, there was grass in areas that there is no grass now.
Yeah. Oh yeah, it changes pretty quickly. Like if people are heavily using that area, you'll see it change pretty quick.
Well, something that's also very special about Weeki Wachee is that it is a tidally influenced spring system, which is not that common.
Very true.
And in a healthy system, you know, if there was a storm and salt water pushed its way up into the fresh water and plants died, well, it's not that big of a deal because you have enough healthy grass in other areas to restore that area.
Yeah.
Like the system is able to bounce back quicker. But because that's not where we're at in Weeki Wachee, when the last big storm came through and pushed that storm surge this far up, a lot of the grasses died and there's nothing to replace it. So, you know, it just isn't able to rebound. It's not resilient anymore because it's already sick.
So I think, like myself included, a lot of people want to help, you know, protect manatees, save manatees, and they don't necessarily know the best way to do that. Like, how does the average person help in your efforts of protecting manatees? Like, what can people do today that will help manatees, or what should they start considering in ways that will help manatees for the future?
I think something that can never be overlooked is word of mouth or talking with the people you know, because most people don't realize that you're not supposed to touch manatees, that you're supposed to give them space. Most people don't realize manatees go to warm water because they need it to survive.
Yep.
And explaining those things to people, once you know them, can really go a long way in getting people to understand. I mean, I had a friend text me very recently and he said, hey, I want to go pet manatees. And I was like, hey, here's all the reasons you should not do that. You know, and now that person is able to tell their friends about it when they ask, you know, going to Florida, what can I do? What is the most sustainable thing? It also creates a social change where, you know, if you're going to go out on a tour.
No sharks yet.
Yeah, very good.
Thanks.
People go out on a tour. Sorry, I lost my train of thought.
No, you're good. We were just talking about like what people can actually do.
Yeah,
you
so
know,
I think
beyond the word, word of mouth is a huge one.
Yeah, being aware of what is sustainable and what isn't, and kind of doing your own research, and that's true with anything.
Yeah.
When you're going out,
Yeah.
Understanding where you're going and why you're going. Most people do trust that their guide knows what's best and is doing the right thing, and so most people don't go out there intending to do harm.
Yeah.
Right, and so I think being aware, or once you've realized that you've done something wrong, and being like, well, I recognize what I did and I'm going to change my behavior. Like that is the best thing you can do, and having that air of, we're all learning and we always have something to learn.
Yeah.
But then also, if you're renting a boat in Florida, it's very important that you look at you look at a map.
The blooper reel is going to love that.
You look at a map of the manatee protection zones, or where it's shallow, where there's grasses when you're out there.
Yeah.
Learn the area before you go out, because, and not just manatees use the waterways, dolphins and sea turtles and lots of other amazing animals that need protection, but also always boat slow if you can.
Yeah.
Because there's no harm.
People are always in a rush
in
for
boating slow.
Yeah. People are always in a rush, it seems like. Even just in the day-to-day life, like everyone's in a rush. Like, let's slow down, enjoy what's around us a little bit more, and that'll help immensely. And yeah, I think of like that video that Taylor took of the drone video where the boater like went over the manatee and then turned around and like came back over the manatee, and I'm like, you got to know that that's wrong. Like at some point, like the hope is that they can be educated a little bit more on that. We got another manatee here.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I see the shadow there.
There.
Yep.
It's the other thing I was going to say. Always wear polarized sunglasses.
Yeah, I know, right?
On a boat.
I have mine on my head, and I can't see them too well right now.
It's always the best way to see manatees and other wildlife is to wear polarized sunglasses. Also protects your eyes. And then having a spotter on your boat, someone who can stand at the front and keep an eye out for wildlife.
That's a good idea. Yeah, that's a great idea. I think all good tips. I think, if anyone takes anything away from this video, I think they should just really understand how much appreciation people have for manatees, how important they are to our ecosystem. Just the cool creatures that they are. Like over time, I've just realized how like funny they are, and like they've got personalities. They'll come up and like hug the bottom of your kayak. Like they're the coolest things, and if you just let them be them, that's when they really like show off those personalities. But yeah, thank you, Tiare. Thank you for spending the time today paddling around the Weeki Wachee. I know we had some rain, but it's still beautiful out.
It is.
You can't be mad. A day on the water is better than a day in the
we saw how many manatees? 5?
Probably 5. There was 2 more that were off to the left that I don't know if you saw, so maybe 7. I don't know if those were the same 2 we saw.
And the tide's going out too, which is...
Yeah. So there could be, do they usually head out when the tide is going out? Like, do they take the tide out and then they'll...
Yeah, usually it's more likely to see manatees on a high tide.
Okay.
But this seems like a high-low tide.
Yes, the water level is high out here.
It's still high even though it's low, so that's probably why.
Yeah.
But in these tidally influenced areas, manatees oftentimes will travel with the tide. I think a big part of it is also the number of people on the river.
Yeah.
If they have other places they can go, and
Sure.
Whether there's food or not, right? Because if there's food in another area that has less people, you'd think manatees probably going to avoid going where the crowd is.
Well, unless the people are giving them lettuce and water,
which we do not want to do.
Which we do not want to do.
We do not want to do that.
Yeah, we do not want to do. So, yeah, again, thank you for spending the time doing this. And this morning, she went out to Homosassa and dove and cleaned off the cameras there. So check out those cameras because they're going to be nice and clean. So check out those cameras. You can see the manatees that are at Homosassa. But yeah, again, thank you so much. Thanks for everything that Save the Manatee has done for us and just for the manatee in general. general. What you're doing is definitely appreciated, here's me giving you some flowers for that, because I think people just in general need to give each other some praise more often, so thank you for all the hard work that you've done, the years that you've put into this, and the years ahead, hopefully, that you'll continue to put into it. So thanks.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yes.
It's been great to talk about manatees.
She's like, I want to do this more.
I'll talk for hours.
Let's go.